truly blessed and duly
Every Sunday is special at Hope, but it is especially special when Larry sings for us, isn't it? I'm not sure why I like Christina Baldwin, author of The Seven Whispers. The PC answer, that is to say, the pastorally correct answer, is that this insightful woman has dedicated her life to writing about and building communities of reflection, adventure, and purpose. This is true, but to be honest with you, I think there are other ties that bind our hearts in human love. Christina's and mine. With whom we bond has at least as much to do with ourselves and our own healthy self-interest as it does with the vocations and commitments of those to whom we attach ourselves. So first, Christina and I share a common ethnic heritage. Her mother's side of the family hails from Scandinavia, and as transplanted farmers tilled the land in what some offensively call flyover country. Flyover country. I had to figure out who was actually dreaming when I moved to the paradise of Southern California. We lived on a fault line, on a muddy hillside, no less. The canyon view the realtors heralded was on a sliding scale, if you get my drift. Well, Tulsa is not a coastal town, not yet at least. Even having a bona fide Billy Sims Burgers hasn't put a dent in Tulsa's provincialism. Now, I love it here. Don't get me wrong. I'm just tired of hearing about how much I should love it here. Like Christina, my maternal side is also Swedish, which explains a lot more than just my blonde hair. My mother and others of our ethnicity seem to have gifted me with a degree of reserve that often keeps me grounded in reality. Not to mention a constant craving for meatballs and rusks, the latter being a nice way to refer to what is basically burnt toast. The Swedes aren't much for spices in their food, only in their movies, which seem to more than make up for culinary blandness. Christina Baldwin and I also share an identical paternal ethnicity, as our fathers and their people were Scots-Irish tinkers, beekeepers, and preachers. While I may not have the fiery red hair to prove it, the complementary temperament is evident. So why am I stressing ethnic commonality? I do so because it is the starting place for consciousness that can lead in turn to a greater awareness of the world around us and our own place in it. Consciousness is the mind's capacity to observe the self in reality and to apply those observations to their daily decision-making. If you want to know what is right and what is wrong about you, begin with your family tree. Your family tree. Water it, fertilize it, prune it, or chop it down, but don't ignore it. Consciousness of your ethnicity is at the very core of who you are. You must traverse and learn the territory of the self's internal boundaries. As Christina herself writes, I learned who was being me at any given moment. Yet our own external institutions intentionally lead us astray. Ethnic heritage. We live in an era in which melting pots and multiculturalism are both the norm and expected in liberal circles. And this pot of homogenized stew has boiled over into centrist and even conservative communities as well. Our social engineers seem to be following the leaders of economic consolidation and the dictators of the corporate buyout, who deny that less is really less when it comes to freedom of choice. In denying our differences, we chip away at the foundations of true democracy. And while it is sad that our obsession with multiculturalism misses the mark entirely, it is even more tragic when people of goodwill buy into the multicultural myth. For when one's goal becomes a premature reality, all the work toward achieving that goal comes to an abrupt and fatal halt. Moreover, assimilation and accommodation and acculturation are misguided goals at best, and they often serve to contribute to a destructive culture of conformity under the guise of the celebration of oneness. Who sets the standards for such oneness? Let us hope and pray it is not the usual suspects, white capitalist males of privilege. Remember NAFTA? We do our children an injustice in our religious education programs when we teach, we are all one people under the sky. Kids know better the moment they leave their segregated houses of worship and enter their integrated schools and neighborhoods and skate parks and families and. We are different, and the cure for what ails us is not homogenization. It is the amalgamation of borders, languages, and cultures. As one of our Unitarian Universalist forebearers put it, we need not think alike to love alike. We don't even have to be alike. In fact, that's impossible. Don't ever check your differences at the door. Instead, share them respectfully, generously, and by all means, civilly. Listen to the voices of your ancestors. Like it or not, they are a big part of who you are. Second, Christina and I share common ground, literally. That is, we both have spent much time living in the middle of the country, in the middle of the middle class. Christina lived in Minnesota for 20 years. Her first visit to the West Coast for a spiritual retreat, no less, was unsettling. She states, I traveled along with the crowd, trying to fit in. I assumed I was the only one surprised. After all, I was from Minnesota. My neck of the woods encompassed Illinois, Wisconsin, and Ohio, America's heartland. When I traveled abroad, that is west of the Rockies or east of the Appalachians, I was amazed at how quickly folk discerned that I was not from their native land. Was it something I said? Most likely it was, as I distinctly pronounced every syllable through my nose. That's the upper Midwest. Was it something I wore? The polyester in my closet speaks for itself. And yes, there are some things that are best left in the closet. Was it something I craved, like crushed potato chip topped tuna concoctions, or sweet potatoes smothered in running marshmallow? These are things you'll never find at Billy Sims or its trendy vegetarian alternative, Spit and Sprout. Yeah. Christina and I can actually relate to casseroles and two-car garages, to being the last to adopt fashion trends and the first to wear them past their prime. We expect that the latest fads here have become historical facts there. We are used to being considered neither Southern California shallow nor New England intellectual. In fact, we are used to not being considered at all. So why am I stressing geographic commonality? Where your family tree was planted determines much about your own capacity to grow and mature. What is right and what is wrong about you depends, in part, on your ability to live in context. Context is the social, political, and spiritual force that shapes the life of a person. You must traverse and learn the territory of the self's exterior influences. Your context. You can embrace it, tolerate it, belittle it, or defy it, but you cannot ignore it. The place from which you came impacts the direction your life takes. As Mary Catherine Bateson says, any place we stop to rest must also serve as the platform from which we must leave. The significance of place permeates the soul. Once again, however, our own external institutions lead us astray. The fabled stability of the middle-class existence has become the dominant model of modern life worldwide, courtesy of new and intrusive technology. This is the vision to which we have been taught to aspire. It reinforces countless variations via television, movies, books, and the internet. Now, in this century, the suburban utopia of June and Ward Cleaver, along with Wally and the Beaver, can be brought home literally to families in Sadr City, Iraq. Now Muslims everywhere can incorporate this collective fantasy about what is desirable and achievable. No wonder they fail to see us as liberators, for even in our own country, the fantasy is falling apart. It is impossible to thrive in a society in which our personal lives are separated from the life of our times. And that is the crux of our current dilemma. We are being forced to evaluate and reconsider assumptions, expectations, and values that have guided our lives thus far. Don't think for a minute that our counterparts in other countries are not doing the same. Says Baldwin, we are losing our way of life, and we need to lose it in order not to lose life itself. We talk about being the world's leaders, a most favored nation, and a chosen people. However, until our vision of what constitutes successful living shifts from acquisition to accountability, we deserve the world's contempt for our way of being. Yes, Christina, we do need to lose it. I am not always proud of where I came from or that I am an American. There, I said it. But if this land is your land and this land is my land, then it is time that we listen, really listen to the voices of terra firma so as to reinvent ourselves and then do the same with society. I'm not talking about make America great again or two Americas. I am talking about a new America, one that transcends borders, languages, and cultures. Such an America, a reinvented America, does not derive from politics. Rather, it springs from the realm of the Spirit. It is a reinvention that listens to the land rather than the land grabbers. It is a revolution that begins in the heart, not on the battlefield. This leads me to the last tie that binds Christina Baldwin and I, and it gives me a reason to hope. It provides the opportunity to lose our way of living and discover life itself. It has been a spiritual enigma for centuries, you know. Lose your life to find it. For when one vision fails, history tells us another vision rises. I think of the celebrated M. Scott Peck, who, when asked what he considered to be the most significant source of social change, replied in a way that may at first surprise you. He answered, Alcoholics Anonymous, because it introduced the idea that people could help themselves. And in AA, you usually start by acknowledging the voice of a higher power, often a voice and power from within. Throughout history, there have always been lone visionaries, but never before has the call to awaken from the sleep of complacency been heeded by so many people. Not just observers like M. Scott Peck, but ordinary people, everyday alcoholics, have discovered that personal and social reinvention is possible when one is willing to listen to the voice within. Yes, it is a still small voice, but it may well be the most powerful voice in the world, and it is yours. We are living in the middle of an experiment in how to be human, and the old paradigm is fading away, struggling to let itself go, and fighting tooth and nail against its inevitable demise. One prophet's inner voice was recorded for posterity, and it is a good thing. This man was hearing voices. You shall go out with joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Joy. We shall go out with joy. Are you hearing voices? Wake up your senses, and with practice, the voice becomes almost audible. Let down your rational guard, and with patience, the voice finds your spirit. Leave behind life's lunacy, and, as prophesied, the voices usher in joy. And if they are the voices of your ancestors, the voices of the land, or the voice within, know that life's reinvention draws nigh. To the glory of life.